Tuesday, June 10th. I should mention the riots that are going on right now throughout the country because it's all over the news. And this picture here was taken just a couple days ago in Los Angeles. And they're calling this a protest. Now, I don't want to get into my opinion on this because it's very heated right now. And I don't want to look back in a week or a month or a year and go, oh, I should have shut up, shouldn't have reacted so much. But all I got to say is this picture, this is not a protest, okay? Cars on fire, total chaos. I mean, this was a great fantasy of mine when I was, a extreme punk, metal guy, and I might have wore pants just like this with a Misfits patch, It was a great fantasy, this whole Mad Max fantasy, but this isn't the world we want to live in. This is why we live in America, because we don't want third world Mad Max anarchy, because in that type of society, odds are you are going to get killed. You're not going to be on the top of the food chain. And if you are, it means you're exactly what you're claiming the oligarchs and the fascists and whatever you want to label your enemy, that's who's going to be in charge in a third world Mad Max kind of world. It's going to be the biggest, baddest, meanest asshole in the tribe. And if you're not that guy or you're not in with that person, you're going to get stepped on, you're going to get smushed, you're going to get killed. So, this is not a protest. This is terrorism. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Before getting to viewer comments, I just like to take a moment and thank all of the human beings out there that watch my videos, and I hope you get something out of it. I don't do this for the money, but I do like to remind you all that there is a link in all of my videos for a Buy Me a Coffee website where you can donate there if you want to support what I do. There's also a link to my email, tinfoilhatfashion@gmail.com. I always welcome your feedback on any of the topics that I cover. I'm approaching 500 subscribers, which that's pretty awesome. I sort of remember when I was just reaching 100 subscribers, and I thought that was pretty cool. But hey, 500, that's even better. I always wonder how many of these subscribers are actually human beings, and I bring this up a lot because I genuinely want to know, because it gets into one of the ongoing topics that I talk about a lot, which I don't know a whole lot about, but this whole thing with Google and AI and bots and artificial accounts, and this is something I find very fascinating, and I would really like to know a lot more about it. So if anyone has any tips of any kind on that topic, especially if you work at Google or something, I would love to hear about that, and I will always respect your anonymity on something like that. So let's get into the viewer comments. 4 days ago, 1964-14N said, he cares deeply for people. So that's why he blackmailed Heidi Klum. She had to buy a house for him and his mom. This person is talking about the video I did on Chris Cornell's bodyguard who was interviewed. It's the only on-camera interview that I have found anywhere where Martin Kurson talks about the night that Chris Cornell died, and the whole thing is obviously very contrived and extremely fishy, and obviously designed to make Martin Kurson look good and to endear him to Chris Cornell's fans, which really only supports my theory and many people's theory that Kurson was involved with Cornell's murder in some way. Martin Kurson dated Heidi Klum before he was Chris Cornell's bodyguard, and I did read that she bought him a house after they broke up. Maybe his mom too, I don't know. And I don't know if blackmail had anything to do with all that, but it was pretty odd that she just bought him a house without explanation after they broke up. Not sure what to make of that. The same individual, 1964-14N, said, he looks like a shell of himself, as he should. This person is speaking about Martin Kurson, I think, the way he appears in that video. it's a very odd video. I think any Chris Cornell fan that is concerned about, you know, the narrative around his death and how fishy it is should watch that video, because I don't know, it's just kind of mandatory viewing if you ask me. Stephen LeBlanc 4002 said, head wound was already there on stage from hair being pulled out. That's a fact. It's on video. That there was no blood on the door or bed from that pre-existing wound. So this person's talking about, well, they're commenting on the video I did, Cornell and Bennington, which that isn't necessarily about analyzing Cornell's murder, which I think Cornell was murdered. I believe he was. I did a whole video about it. It's one of my most popular videos. One of the anecdotes floating around the internet that has been out there for a long time is that supposedly on Soundgarden's last concert, the night that Chris Cornell died, that you can see a wound on the back of his head when he's on stage. I believe this is total disinformation. I don't believe that at all. I've watched the video many times. You can all go watch it. You could possibly interpret certain shots of the back of his head as being some sort of wound, but I don't think it is at all. And if it was anywhere near looking like that, I would freely admit it. And that's just my opinion. I think that's all complete bullshit. And I think this Stephen LeBlanc person or bot or whatever it is trying to promote that bit of disinformation, either because this is a person that actually believes it, or it's a bot that is trying to confuse the narrative around Chris Cornell's death, of which there is a huge campaign on the internet, and there has been for some time. Same with Kurt Cobain. There is an obvious will online. Someone is spending money to put disinformation out there or cloud the narrative around Cobain's death. I don't know who it is, but it's definitely out there. It's definitely happening. This same account, Stephen LeBlanc 4002, said, Kirsten is actually reliving the event in his mind. I mean, he's being asked about it, so what else would he be doing, right? You can visually see the change in Kirsten breathing when the subject of Cornell comes up, as if this was prearranged to talk about, but only on their terms. Yeah, okay, well, you know, obviously the entire video is about how suspect and contrived I believe the video is. So these comments are just building off of that same assumption. So that's fine. April Nelly, who has commented before, and who I think is a human being, said, this AI seems to mimic your vocal pattern and cadence. I like the Sistine Chapel ceiling referenced in the thumbnail. All right, so this person is making two different statements about two different things. This AI seems to mimic your vocal pattern. This is a comment on the fact that sometimes on my videos I will change the pitch of my voice. I will raise it or lower it just to, when there's a lot of dialogue, I will use it to differentiate if I'm quoting different people. If I'm quoting two different or three different people in the same video, I will change the pitch of my voice in order to differentiate one personality from another. It's just something I've been experimenting with to make my videos more interesting. I like that kind of random weird stuff myself when I'm watching videos, so that's why I do it. I hope that you see the humor in some of my videos. I don't want them to be too overly serious, although most of the subject matter is very serious. I like the Sistine Chapel ceiling referenced in the thumbnail. Yeah, I found this picture online. I've seen it before. I think it's brilliant, actually. And, you know, I talk about E.T. in another blog, and one of the movie posters for E.T. Utilizes the same mockery of the Sistine Chapel, where it's, you know, it's this hand, it's Elliot's hand coming out and touching a hand that's coming down, which is E.T.'s finger, you know, which is obviously blasphemy, because it's replacing the hand of God with an alien, with E.T. But I go into that in another video, which obviously I encourage you to watch. Jeanette Rhodes Stevens 2 weeks ago said, exactly, many supported the obvious genocide of convid idiots, probably died from the death jab, question mark. All right, so I don't know. I just, it's hard for me to believe this, that a human being said this. You can see this, there's 4 posts here in a row. I mean, I've seen people text this way, all right? But, to comment on a video on YouTube in that same sort of way is, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure there's people that do it, but the first thing I think is this person is high on drugs, and that's why they're doing it, instead of thinking all of their thoughts out and putting them all out into one comment. Anyway, I digress. This person or this algorithm is commenting on the Mark Lanigan, Cobain, and Other Mysteries video I posted, where I get into my theories about how Mark Lanigan died, why he moved to Ireland, and I don't insinuate that Lanigan died from the jab that is referenced here. I think you all know what the jab is. I call it the big V, but that's what this bot or this person seems to be commenting on. The same poster put, Haché, a very sketchy publishers. Didn't the owner die off rocks in Sydney? Now, this is kind of interesting because, I talk about Haché Books Publishing and how Lagardère Group is one of the financiers. Lagardère's largest shareholder, last I checked, was Qatar. And if you look up Qatar, Qatar, you will see that they are believed to fund the Muslim Brotherhood. And the Muslim Brotherhood took credit for shooting up the Le Bataclan when the Eagles of Death Metal played there back in 2000. I don't know, what was it, 2015, 16, I forget. Anyway, I didn't even know who the owner was, but I looked this up, and yeah, it appears that the CEO of Haché Australia and chairman of Haché New Zealand died in a surfing accident. Matt Ritchell. So, that's something interesting to look into. I haven't, but why has this Joe Gilmore jumped from the 3rd of April to the 7th of April? That's sus. And there is a Tom Grant email address. Who is Joe Gilmore working for? So again, I assume this bot or person or whatever this is trying to point out some kind of discrepancy in my video where, I don't care enough to go look in my video and try to find out what they're talking about. But this isn't the first time a suspected bot has commented on one of my videos and tried to point something out that is supposed to be some kind of flaw in what I'm saying that turns out to be totally like some really shallow, like ignorant interpretation of what I'm saying that's sort of on purpose to try and basically make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. And there is a Tom Grant email address. Who is Joe Gilmore working for? I mean, you can tell these are bots because it doesn't make sense the way they jump from one statement to the next. There is a Tom Grant email address. Well, I never said there wasn't, so what is this responding to? I mean, I got the interview with Tom Grant, who Courtney Love hired. That's the investigator that Courtney Love hired to look for Kurt Cobain. You can go to his website, CobainCase.com. His email's right on there. He's easy to contact. You don't have to have any special access. So who is Joe Gilmore working for? If I was working for someone, I would be getting paid, and I'm certainly not. I'm not making shit doing this. But you can just take my word for it. Me being the way I think, how paranoid I am, I always ask that question. So that's good that someone is asking that question. But it's really funny to me because I can see that I don't, I do this because I want to do it. So my reward is that people read it and that people comment, and I can see what these bots post, and I can get insight into, how the algorithms work and how AI works and how it's shaping our society. I find that fascinating and actually important. And I hope by doing these videos that I can convince some of you that this is important to pay attention to and to understand. Jeanette Rhodes Stevens, again, oh dear, Charles Bukowski, type screed, another sick influence. Yeah, Mark Lanigan, I think, was really into Charles Bukowski. That probably came up in the video somewhere. I don't remember where. I was sort of into Charles Bukowski many years ago, like in the late 90s, when I was on Mark Lanigan's path. I sort of saw myself as this, kind of artistic, drug-taking bohemian. I will freely admit I sort of saw myself that way at one point. And if I had the backing of Mark Lanigan and the positioning of him and the fame and all that, I would probably have become him. And maybe that sounds like an arrogant statement, but I can honestly say I'm glad I didn't. I call that Mark Lanigan's path the highway to hell, and it's a popular path to take. It's a path that I probably would have taken in a second if it was offered to me. So, moving on, April Nelly said, "NM, you went there. Thanks." I feel like I should know what NM means. Maybe they meant to put NW, like no way you went there. I admit I don't quite understand what this means, but it sounds like a compliment to me. So thank you, April Nelly, and I thank you for the comment. I was talking about this post about James Comey posted an Instagram, I think it was, where he posted a picture of 8647, which is basically get rid of 47, which is Trump. Trump is the 47th president, the 45th and the 47th. 86 means get rid of. If you've worked in a restaurant, you know this. But apparently the mob, and I didn't know this until I looked a little more into it, the mob, the mafia, when they wanted to get rid of someone, like kill them, whack them, one of the phrases they used was 86 him. And apparently James Comey would have full knowledge of this, given his track record, given his experience. So, he isn't the kind of person that should be shooting his mouth off like this. And that's what this was. This was him shooting his mouth off, basically saying kill Trump is what this means. And I don't care where you stand on the political spectrum. If you hate Trump, it's so silly that we got to talk this way in society. We got to be like, oh, well, where do you stand on Trump? Like, that's the barometer of how we relate to one another. And I just want to reiterate something that I try to reiterate as much as possible on here. We are more alike than we are different. And it's very easy to get caught up in identity politics, to basically looking at your neighbor and saying, well, I'm going to form my opinion about my neighbor based upon whether he likes Trump or not. I mean, you're ignoring 99% of who that person is. We all want to be safe. We all want to be loved. We all want to be happy. No one wants to walk down the street and have to fight someone in order to get to where they want to go. I mean, there are people like that, but they live in places that are hostile and they're used to it because that's how they grew up. But if they had a taste of freedom where there was law and order in society, and you can walk to the store and come home and no one hassles you, and you say hi to your neighbor and everyone's friendly, I mean, that's nice. We should all want that. But you see, you don't get that without law and order. Suspect down 5133 said, also, why is nobody making mention of the gold, yellow, 8 and black 647? The reason I didn't talk about other details in this image, which, obviously that's what I do a lot. I have lots of videos where I analyze movie posters and such, but I really think the statement it's so in your face that there's really no need to look at the sand. I mean, I've looked at the sand. Well, here's a closer image. These look like feet marks pressing down the sand to make it flat so that the numbers that they're going to put are very clear. Why these are sort of reddish orange and these are dark, I don't know. Maybe that's to do with Trump's hair, orange man bad and all that. The only thing I really came up with is that, these are shells, and shells, it makes me think of shotgun shells. So 86-47, get rid of them. Bullets, guns, black makes me think of lead, rocks. But I really don't think there's a whole lot to this image other than what it's just saying right up front, which is kill Trump. That's what it's saying. If you're for violence, if you're for assassinating the president, I mean, I'm not down with that, man. You know? And again, I come from a sort of anarchist, punk rock, heavy metal, subculture background. That's where I come from. And I understand the whole, like, destroy the establishment perspective. But the thing is, you've got to realize that there is such a thing as propaganda. And the whole purpose of propaganda is to distort and deceive your perception of reality. And I see a whole lot of people who are eating up the deception and just agreeing with the mainstream, agreeing with the mainstream narrative. And I don't understand how people don't have the ability to step back and realize, how come all of my opinions are exactly in line with CNN and New York Times and Yahoo News? Why is that? Am I agreeing with the establishment? And am I part of the establishment? I mean, if you're a rebel, if you're an anarchist, if you're whatever against the mainstream, that means your views probably aren't going to agree with the mainstream. And yet people come up with tattoos and piercings and I'm alternative and blah, blah, blah. And yet all of their opinions align exactly with the mainstream. I don't know. I don't get it. I don't want to waste a bunch of time trying to convince some imaginary audience out there that might be watching this, but I'm genuinely frustrated about this. And anyway, let's move on. Suspect Down 5133 said, "Is there something in the sand around the 86-47? Yeah, maybe, but I kind of already went over that. So let's just move on. South American Death 6045 said, "Wow, she definitely made an impression." This is a reference to the woman I talk about in this video, Nazi Punks Fuck Off. This lady came into an establishment where I was doing a job. I was doing security, actually. And this lady comes in wearing a Nazi Punks Fuck Off shirt. And me being, my background is that I come from these, punk rock, heavy music scene, So I know what that means because that's a Dead Kennedy song. Nazi Punks Fuck Off. Napalm Death covered it. I watched Napalm Death do that song when they played, I think it was with Brujeria, where I sat there and watched an entire room of people chanting "Fuck Trump." Yeah, so yeah, that lady made an impression upon me because she symbolized something to me, because she showed up with a Nazi Punks Fuck Off shirt, and then she proceeded to behave like a grifter, like I don't know, like a psychotic. I don't know what she was doing. She was going up to people, get them to buy her drinks and like eat their food and mooch off of them. I mean, I don't get that. That's something I would never do. I would feel like a vagrant doing something like that. But that's what this lady was doing, and I had to kick her out because people were complaining about her. So I made the point that I felt like people will use virtue signaling. They will try to stand for something that is morally correct, that has the moral high ground, and they will use it as a way to cover, as a sort of shield, to behave badly themselves. You read about pedophiles and you read about serial killers. Ed Gein had neighbors that said, "Oh, he was a very nice guy. He always said hi in the morning and he always waved to me." I mean, this is what sexual predators do. This is what evil people who know that what they're doing is bad will instinctually, some of them, the most successful ones, will try to build up this positive character. They are very aware of what people perceive to be positive, and they will implant themselves in positions that make them look like good, upstanding members of society precisely so they can get away with their predatorial, down low, behind the scenes activities, which are completely amoral or immoral. So that was kind of the point I was trying to make in that video there, which you can go watch if you choose to. Chuck Newcomb 3577 was commenting on my Chemtrails DARPA RFK Jr. Video, episode 40 of Off the Cuff. They're just going to spray harder and more in other states that allowing it cross-contamination doesn't count. Again, I mean, if you're a human being, do you really just type something like this out and post it and don't go, oh, wait a minute, that didn't quite make sense. Will Joe Gilmore understand what I'm saying? Think about what you're typing. Like, ask yourself, will this make sense to me if I go back and read it? I don't even know what to make of it. Like, I don't even know what it's really saying. Like, yeah, there's chemtrails in every state. It sucks. We need to uncover it. And I think RFK Jr. is one of the few politicians that has come out and said, I'm going to look at this and I'm going to do something about it. So that's good. Yes. Can we please find out who is deploying these planes? What are they spraying in the air? What are we breathing in? Don't we care? Let's get to the bottom of this, please. And my friend April Nelly, again, what's up, JG? Thanks for posting. April, I hope you're a human being. I don't want you to feel offended that I think you might be a bot. I tend to lean on the side that you are a human. So I'm glad about that. I appreciate any human being that makes a thoughtful post on any of my videos, on any topic. And this was on the Austin Metcalf murder, Off the Cuff, episode 39. I'm glad someone looked at that. I think that this race thing, it's very important for Americans to acknowledge, especially blacks and whites, because you've got to understand and you've got to see that the main thing that the powers that be are trying to use to divide us, and they're doing it right now today while I'm talking, they want to divide the whites and all of the non-whites by bringing up old historical, slavery and, oh, California used to be Mexico and all this. Anything they can bring up to manipulate your mind and get young people angry and marching in the streets like, yeah, this used to be Mexico, so get out of here, white people. I mean, they're deliberately creating racial division. And, as it applies to this particular topic, this black kid stabbed a white kid in the heart with a knife because the white kid told him to move. And, this isn't about singling out black people that behave badly. That's not what it's about. But it's about recognizing how the media took this incident and sort of took the side of the kid, the murderer, and tried to say that anyone who's taking the side of the white kid is a racist. And this is just, you've got to see the evil that's going on here, regardless of your skin color, because they want to pit blacks against whites, and they do this by taking the side of blacks most of the time and encouraging ignorant behavior. They want you to behave. They think you're stupid. And I'm talking to you, non-whites out there. They want you to behave stupidly. They want you to act like a thug. They want you to stab someone for telling you to move. They want you to do that, and then they're going to take your side and they're going to use it as a way to create racial divisiveness. You've got to recognize this because this is your country, and you might think they're putting you on a pedestal at some point, but in the end, they're going to annihilate all of us. They're not going to save you and you're not going to be on a pedestal when it's all said and done. When it's all said and done, they're going to do the same thing to you. We are all children of God. We were all created equal. God loves us all. But we don't have to love bad behavior. Bad behavior should be recognized. It should be pointed out, and it should be gotten rid of. And law and order is important. If you don't have law and order, you're in a third world, or even worse, a Mad Max world. either absolute government control like communism, or you've got tribal warfare where you will most likely not be at the top of the food chain. You will be at the bottom. And at that point, your sexual identity, your racial identity, none of that will matter. The only thing that will matter is power at that level. Will Ray, 1 month ago, commented on Mark Lanigan, Cobain, and Other Mysteries, one of my most popular videos consistently. The 9/11 terror attacks were not in 2015. Hard to have confidence that anything said here is true. So this is either a bot or a troll that was deployed to try and make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about. And again, I mentioned this earlier, this is a very shallow, probably intentionally shallow observation. I didn't say that the 9/11 terrorist attacks were in 2015. I said that Le Bataclan was sold on 9/11, which is a fact. You can look that up. A couple months before the terrorist attacks occurred there. And, obviously I was talking about the 9/11 anniversary. I wasn't saying it happened literally in 2001. So this is an example of the will, the money being spent to go out there and control the narrative surrounding Mark Lanigan's death and Kurt Cobain's death. And this algorithm or this person has orders to take my blogs apart, particularly this blog about Mark Lanigan, and try to say something that sort of attacks me or makes me look bad. I don't think a human being would actually go in there and come up with this. This sounds like just a pure algorithm at work. Another comment on my Chris Cornell's Bodyguard video by Ornellal-T1F. Sounds like a bot to me. Journalist role-playing guy doing publicity, like trying to sell a product. He feels things to the core, right? Not just a cold callous. Why say saw that? Who asked? People, the killer is right in front of you here. Now, okay, I get that this statement here, this series of statements, it's so screwed up the way it's put together. This is a bot, okay? It's obviously trying to be in favor of my perspective, trying to be on my side. But the way this is put together is so screwed up. I mean, humans don't talk this way. I mean, if they do, they got to be on drugs or just, I don't know. But I'm not going to comment on it because I don't think this is a human. It's just riffing off of things that are said here, points that I'm making. It's agreeing with me, but as I've said in previous blogs, I think that some of these bots try really hard to blend in so that we can't distinguish them from humans. And she was 296 said, Starbucks sucks. Thank you. And I try my best not to go there and buy coffee, although I have done it, and I do it when I'm, when my car's in the shop and I've got nowhere else to go. It's the only place with coffee. I will go there. I don't like the way they have sort of destroyed coffee culture, which is a big part of, many cultures, European culture, American culture. And I still remember a time where local coffee shops were pretty prevalent. And I know that they still are in a lot of places in America, and I feel like Starbucks came along and tried to sort of corporatize that, homogenize that, centralize that, and it bothers me. I don't like that. And I talk about it a lot in that video, so you can go watch it if you want to hear me complain about Starbucks for about half an hour. Road AXEIFY said, who the hell is that interview dude? Does he shut up? Why is his tongue so far up this dude's arse? Martin is protecting the sickos and this pastor pizza freak. Thanks for posting. I totally agree with all that, and I think it's fun. It's hilarious. This made me laugh. It's echoing basically what I'm saying, is that there's this interview guy. He's hard to describe, but he's such a just ass kisser, paid stooge out of left field that you will see when you watch it. But and December Sound 2536 said, "This is great, thank you." I really appreciate that, December Sound 2536, because I worked very hard on that video, the 13th floor elevators, and I'm very proud of it. And I think what's in there is very important, and I wish people would watch it and take an interest in it, because it gets at the core of a lot of what I talk about here. And I feel like this is kind of my niche. April Nelly, again, posted on my Off the Cuff episode 3, Paul and the Eye of Horus. This was a sort of supplemental video I did on the whole Memoirs of Billy Shears issue, the Beatles. Paul is dead, that whole thing. I've listened to Quay on the Billy Shears topic. Fun, but unconvincing for me. However, have you ever seen the footage of the caretaker of Paul's childhood home? So yeah, this is a reference to Sage of Quay, that's someone, Paul Williams. I mention him a lot in my video because I want to give credit to him, because he has done an immense amount of research. He's, if you want to get into Paul is Dead and the Memoirs of Billy Shears, he is the #1 guy you need to look into. He's on Rumble. I think he's on YouTube too. I think he might be some type of deep state intelligence agent. I don't know that for a fact. I suspect he probably is, but nonetheless, his videos are fascinating. There's a lot of them. They're worth watching. They're endlessly entertaining. If you can't get enough of Paul is Dead, that is the guy you need to go watch immediately. Unconvincing? Well, I mean, Paul Williams is the absolute most convincing person anywhere I've heard on the topic of Paul is Dead, period. If you find him unconvincing, I don't know. Maybe your standards are just astronomically high. I don't know what your standards are, but I don't know what else you want. But a guy presenting all the Beatles facts you can imagine and laying them out for you in detail and giving you his opinion based upon those facts and details. And this thing about the caretaker of Paul's childhood home, I find this so funny because it never ends. When you get into this Paul is Dead stuff, it never ends. There's always something new, and some stuff is just very random and probably not valid, but just so entertaining. So if you go ahead and look up Paul McCartney's caretaker, it's this guy John Halliday. I guess he's 62, and this is actually very interesting because there's videos of this guy, and if you look at him, he does look kind of like the way biological Paul, in other words, the real Paul McCartney, the one that supposedly died, he does kind of look like the way the real Paul McCartney would look if he was still alive. And this is very funny here because look what Google came up with here. The custodian of the childhood home of Sir Paul McCartney has been dismissed after claims he had been drinking while at work. John Halliday, 62, lived and worked at 24th Lynn Road in Liverpool for the past 11 years, but has now been sacked by the National Trust after visitors complained. So, funny anecdote to look into further if you choose to. Tony Bosson 701 said on the Chris Cornell's Bodyguard video, I want to ask Martin about Chris Cornell's death and why he vanished after Chris was murdered. Me too. Although I'm kind of afraid of Martin Kirsten because, I don't know, he kind of seems like he might be a murderer. He's not exactly small. Manic Murph posted 2 months ago, again on the same video, if he was really Chris's friend, wouldn't he refer to him as Chris and not my client? Well, yeah, the wording on this, interview that I refer to on this video, it's all scripted. And if he's calling him my client, and the entire way that the story, it's all very contrived and scripted. And the whole purpose of it is to make you, the Chris Cornell fan, to endear Martin Curson to you. In other words, to make you like Martin Curson, to convince you that, oh, no way he would ever have killed Cornell. In fact, he was terribly traumatized. He's a victim himself. He was traumatized by the death of Chris Cornell, the quote-unquote suicide. Manic Murph also posted, dude cares more about rhinos than protecting his own friends and clients. I think this dude for sure had something to do with his murder. Well, yes, I do too. And the thing about rhinos is kind of interesting. This rhinos came up in another video I saw on a completely unrelated topic. You know, the rhino thing, the rhino conservation, that's a real thing in South Africa, from what I know. But it was just kind of bizarre and random, and I think it was just a way, again, another way for Martin Curson to endear himself to Chris Cornell fans. You know, oh, Martin Curson, he cares about, you know, rhino conservation. He's such a good guy, and, you know, working with nonprofit organizations and such. But I get into that more in the video if you want to go watch it. And I think that's it. And I will end this video with an image that I asked ChatGPT to come with. If you watched my last video, I talked about how I believe the Antichrist will actually be invented by AI. I think AI will give birth to the Antichrist.